She stood in the aisle, clutching a battered rucksack, looking down at the man who had thrown her belongings onto the floor. He wore a $3,000 bespoke suit and a sneer that reeked of entitlement. When Greg Alliston stole seat 1A from Jasmine Carter, he told her that first class was for people who actually matter. He thought he was teaching a street kid a lesson in social hierarchy. He thought the flight attendants would back his platinum status. He was wrong. Seconds later, the jet engines whined and died. The cabin lights flickered off. The pilot emerged from the cockpit not to apologize, but to deliver a message that would ruin Greg's life. He didn't just steal a seat. He had just declared war on the owner of the plane. The recycled air of John F. Kennedy International Airport always smelled the same, a mix of stale coffee, expensive perfume, and low-grade anxiety. For Jasmine Carter, it was the smell of home, or at least the closest thing to it for someone who spent 300 days a year in transit. She adjusted the oversized hood of her charcoal grey sweatshirt, pulling it lower over her eyes. At 26, Jasmine could easily pass for 19. With her hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup, and a pair of worn-out noise-cancelling headphones resting around her neck, she looked less like a passenger for flight 404 to London, and more like a college student who had gotten lost on her way to a bus terminal. She liked it that way. Invisibility was a currency she had learned to hoard. "Boarding Group 1, the gate agent announced, her voice cracking slightly over the intercom. "First-class passengers and active military personnel only, please." Jasmine shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She held her boarding pass loosely in her hand, a digital ticket on a cracked iPhone screen. She joined the queue, stepping in behind a man who looked like he had been sculpted out of arrogance and hair gel. The man, who was loudly finishing a call on a sleek satellite phone, didn't notice her. He was too busy berating someone on the other end of the line. "I don't care what the SEC filing says, Jerry," the man barked, his voice projecting so that everyone in the immediate vicinity could hear the importance of his conversation. "I want the merger pushed through by Monday morning. If they hesitate, crush them. That's why I pay you the retainer. Now I'm boarding. I expect good news when I land." He hung up and shoved the phone into the breast pocket of his navy blazer. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes sweeping over Jasmine with a dismissal so cold it felt physical. He didn't see a person. He saw an obstacle. He saw static. Jasmine didn't react. She just tightened her grip on the strap of her backpack. It was an old canvas thing, frayed at the edges, bearing a faded patch from a hiking trip in Patagonia. It contained a laptop worth more than the man's car. But he would never know that. They moved down the jet bridge, the transition from the chaotic terminal to the hushed exclusivity of the aircraft. The flight attendant at the door, a woman named Sarah with a tight smile and tired eyes, greeted the man. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Alliston," she said, checking his pass. "Seat 1B, right this way." "Finally," Greg Alliston grumbled, pushing past her without making eye contact. Jasmine stepped up next. She held out her phone. Sarah glanced at the screen, and her eyebrows shot up. She looked from the cracked phone to Jasmine's hoodie, then back to the screen. The ticket read 1A, the most coveted spot on the Boeing 737-300 ZAR. "Miss Carter?" Sarah asked, her tone shifting from routine politeness to confused deference. "That's me," Jasmine said, her voice soft, melodic, but firm. "I see," Sarah stammered slightly. It was rare to see someone in seat 1A who didn't look like they owned a yacht or a senator. "Welcome aboard. Right this way, Miss Carter." Jasmine nodded and walked down the aisle. The first-class cabin was a sanctuary of soft leather, mood lighting, and the promise of champagne before takeoff. It was only 8 suites, arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration. Seat 1A was on the left, a solitary throne by the window. But when Jasmine arrived at row 1, she stopped. Greg Alliston was already there. He wasn't in 1B, the aisle seat assigned to him. He was settled comfortably into 1A, his jacket off, his shoes already kicked off, and a glass of pre-flight bourbon already in his hand. He had spread his newspapers across the console and thrown his briefcase onto the floor of the suite. Jasmine took a breath. She hated confrontation. It was inefficient, but she also hated disorder. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, tapping him lightly on the shoulder. Greg didn't turn around. He snapped his newspaper open, creating a wall between them. "Excuse me," she said again, a little louder. Greg lowered the paper slowly, looking at her over the rim of his reading glasses. His expression was one of profound irritation, as if a fly had buzzed into his ear. "The economy cabin is that way, sweetheart," he said, waving a hand dismissively toward the back of the plane. "You're holding up traffic." "I know where economy is," Jasmine said calmly. "But you're in my seat. I have 1A. You're in 1B. Greg laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He looked her up and down, taking in the ripped jeans, the sneakers, the hoodie. "This is first class," Greg said, articulating the words slowly, as if speaking to a child. "I think you're confused. Maybe you managed to scrape together enough miles for an upgrade, or maybe the system made a mistake. But I am a platinum key holder with this airline. I prefer the window. I'm taking the window. You can take 1B if you really have a ticket, though I doubt it." "It's not about preference," Jasmine said, her pulse beginning to quicken. "It's about the ticket I purchased. Please move to your assigned seat." "No," Greg said, turning back to his paper. "Go find a stewardess if you want to cry about it. But don't speak to me again. I have work to do." Jasmine stood there for a moment, watching the back of his head. She felt the heat rising in her cheeks. It wasn't embarrassment. It was the specific, burning frustration of being underestimated. She turned and walked back to the galley. Sarah, the flight attendant, was busy arranging hot towels. "Excuse me, Sarah," Jasmine said. "Yes, Miss Carter? Is everything all right?" "Mr. Alliston is in my seat," Jasmine said. "He refuses to move." Sarah's face fell. She closed her eyes for a brief second, inhaling sharply. She knew Greg Alliston. The whole crew knew Greg Alliston. He was notorious on the New York to London route, a hedge fund manager with a temper as short as his attention span and a wallet deep enough to make complaints disappear. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "Let me handle this." Sarah smoothed her uniform and marched down the aisle, her posture rigid. Jasmine followed a few paces behind, watching the theater unfold. "Mr. Alliston," Sarah said, her voice practicing that specific octave of cheerfulness required by airline staff when dealing with difficult passengers. Greg didn't look up. "What?" "It seems there's been a small mix-up. You are currently seated in 1A, but your boarding pass is for 1B. This is Ms. Carter's seat. We need you to switch so we can finish boarding." Greg slammed the newspaper down on the tray table. The sound cracked through the quiet cabin, startling a woman in row 2. "I am not moving," Greg spat. He finally looked at Jasmine, pointing a manicured finger at her. "You want me to move for her? Look at her. She looks like she just crawled out of a dumpster in the Bronx. I paid $12,000 for this flight. I conduct millions of dollars of business in the air. I need the privacy of the window. She's probably going to listen to rap music and sleep the whole way. She can sit in the aisle." The cabin went deadly silent. The other passengers, a mix of business executives and wealthy tourists, were now watching with rapt attention. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm. "That is inappropriate. Ms. Carter paid for this seat just as you paid for yours. Actually, Seat 1A is a full fare ticket. You are on a corporate upgrade." It was a subtle dig, but it hit its mark. Greg's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with his tie. "I don't care if she's the Queen of England," Greg hissed. "I am comfortable. I am settled. And I am not getting up. Possession is 9/10 of the law. If she wants to fly first class, she should be grateful to be here at all. Put her in 1B or put her in coach where she belongs, but get her out of my face." Jasmine stepped forward, bypassing Sarah. She leaned in close to Greg, her voice dropping to a register that was dangerously calm. "You have one chance to fix this, Greg," she said, using his first name without permission. "One chance to pick up your briefcase, move 30 inches to your right, and let this plane take off. If you don't, you're going to regret it." Greg stared at her. For a second, he saw something in her eyes, a glint of steel, a hardness that didn't match the hoodie. But his ego was too large to let him process the warning. He reached out, grabbed Jasmine's canvas backpack which she had rested on the ottoman of the seat, and hurled it into the aisle. The bag hit the floor with a heavy thud. A water bottle rolled out. "Get your trash away from me," Greg sneered. "Stewardess, get me a scotch, and get security to remove this woman. She's threatening me." Sarah looked horrified. She bent down to pick up the bag, but Jasmine stopped her with a gentle hand. "Leave it," Jasmine said. Jasmine didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply pulled her phone out of her pocket. She typed a single text message. "To Ops Control, Priority 1. Message, code black on Flight 404. Seat 1A dispute. Hostile packs. Ground it." She hit send. "Fine," Jasmine said, looking at Greg. "Enjoy the seat." She turned and walked to seat 1B, sitting down calmly. She buckled her seatbelt. Greg let out a triumphant snort. "That's what I thought. Know your place." He raised his glass in a mock toast to the other passengers, who quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the display of raw bullying. Sarah looked at Jasmine with apologetic eyes, mouthing, "I'm sorry," before retreating to the galley to inform the captain. The boarding continued. The plane filled up. The doors were closed. The safety demonstration began. Greg Alliston relaxed, stretching his legs out, feeling like the king of the world. He had won. The girl had folded. The natural order was preserved. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The plane didn't push back from the gate. Usually the pilot would come on and mumble something about air traffic control or a baggage delay. But there was only silence. The air conditioning hummed, then sputtered. Then the lights in the cabin flickered and died, replaced by the harsh emergency lighting strips along the floor. The entertainment screens went black. The hum of the engines, which had been idling, cut out completely. The silence was sudden and oppressive. Greg frowned. "What now? Sarah? Why is the power off?" Before Sarah could answer, the cockpit door burst open. It wasn't the co-pilot. It was the captain himself. Captain Miller was a man of 50, with salt and pepper hair and the broad shoulders of a former Air Force fighter pilot. He didn't look happy. He looked furious. He didn't grab the intercom handset. He walked straight into the first-class cabin, his eyes scanning the seats until they landed on row 1. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Miller's voice boomed without amplification, "I apologize for the delay. However, this aircraft has been grounded." "Grounded?" Greg shouted, standing up. "What for?" "I have a meeting in London in 7 hours. This is incompetent." Captain Miller turned his gaze slowly toward Greg. "It's grounded, Mr. Alliston," the captain said, "because the owner of the aircraft has revoked flight clearance effective immediately." "The owner?" Greg scoffed. "The airline owns the plane, and I own shares in the airline. I'll have your badge for this." "Actually, sir," the captain said, stepping closer, This specific Boeing 777 isn't owned by the airline. It's a leased asset, and the lessor just sent a kill code to the flight computer." Captain Miller turned from Greg and looked at the young woman in the hoodie, sitting in seat 1B. He removed his cap and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Carter," the captain said, his tone dripping with respect. "My apologies. Command just relayed the situation. We are not moving until you are satisfied." The silence in the first-class cabin was so profound you could hear the ice melting in Greg Alliston's glass. Greg looked from the captain to the girl in the hoodie. His brain was trying to connect the dots, but the picture it was forming was impossible. "What are you talking about?" Greg laughed nervously. "Her, the street urchin. What does she have to do with the flight computer?" Captain Miller ignored Greg entirely. He remained focused on Jasmine. "Ms. Carter," Miller continued, "Ground Ops has informed me that there is a security risk in Seat 1A. Protocol dictates that we cannot fly with a compromised manifest. Would you like us to deplane the entire aircraft, or can we resolve this security threat locally?" Jasmine unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. She didn't stand up. She just leaned back, crossing her legs, looking every bit the billionaire she was, despite the denim. "I don't want to inconvenience the other passengers, Captain," Jasmine said. Her voice was cool, detached. "The issue is simple. I booked Seat 1A to review the new cabin noise cancellation retrofits I authorized last month. It's difficult to do that from the aisle." She finally looked at Greg. "Mr. Alliston seems to think he owns the plane because he bought a ticket. I think it's time we clarified who actually owns the plane." Greg's face went pale. "You authorized retrofits?" "This aircraft," Jasmine said, gesturing to the cabin walls, "is a Boeing 777-300ER, tail number N772JB. It is the property of Ether Aviation, a subsidiary of Carter Dynamics. I am Jasmine Carter, CEO of Carter Dynamics." The blood drained from Greg's face so fast he looked like a wax figure. Carter Dynamics, the tech giant, the company that had just acquired the logistics firm his hedge fund was heavily invested in. The company that literally built the guidance systems for half the commercial fleets in the Western Hemisphere. "You're Jay Carter," Greg whispered. Everyone in finance knew the name Jay Carter, but nobody knew the face. The rumors were that Jay Carter was a recluse, a genius coder who never gave interviews. Most people assumed Jay Carter was a man, a 50-year-old white man, not a 20-something black woman in a hoodie. "I tried to tell you," Jasmine said. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, and I possess the title deed to this fuselage." Captain Miller crossed his arms. "Mr. Alliston, you are currently trespassing on a private asset. Ms. Carter has flagged you as a hostile passenger. Under maritime and aviation law, which I am currently enforcing, you have two choices. You can vacate Seat 1A, retrieve your bag from the aisle, and voluntarily deplane." The captain paused for effect. "Or," he continued, "I can have the Port Authority police, who are currently waiting at the jet bridge, come in here and drag you out for interfering with a flight crew and theft of services. And given that you just delayed a transatlantic flight, the federal fines will likely exceed the value of that suit you're wearing." Greg looked around. The other passengers were no longer avoiding his gaze. They were glaring at him. A woman in row 2 held up her phone. She was recording him. "This is ridiculous," Greg stammered, his arrogance crumbling into panic. "I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? She looks like..." "Like what?" Jasmine cut in, her voice sharp as a whip. "Like I don't belong. Like I can't afford to be here." She stood up. She wasn't tall, but in that moment, she towered over him. "That's the problem with men like you, Greg. You think power is a suit. You think power is yelling at people who serve you, Real power is silent. Real power is turning off a jet engine with a text message. Jasmine pointed to the door. "Get off my plane." Greg looked at the captain. Miller's face was stone. He looked at Sarah. She was smiling, a genuine smile this time. Greg grabbed his briefcase. His hands were shaking. He didn't look at anyone. He snatched his jacket and hurried toward the exit, head down, stripping away the last remnants of his dignity. As he reached the galley, 2 Port Authority officers stepped onto the plane. "Greg Alliston?" one of the officers asked. "I'm leaving," Greg squeaked. "I'm leaving voluntarily." "We're not here to escort you off, sir," the officer said, blocking his path. "We're here because your behavior triggered a federal ground stop. We need to see your identification, and we're going to need to check your bags. There's been a claim of aggressive conduct toward a flight crew." Greg was shoved against the galley wall, patted down in front of the entire economy cabin as they boarded. Back in first class, Jasmine sat down in 1A. She picked up the newspaper Greg had left behind and dropped it in the trash. "Captain," she said. "Yes, Miss Carter?" "Turn the plane back on. We have a schedule to keep." "Yes, ma'am." Captain Miller retreated to the cockpit. A moment later, the lights flickered back on. The engines roared to life. But the drama wasn't over. As the plane taxied, Jasmine's phone buzzed. It was a notification from her business intelligence unit. Subject: Alert. Greg Alliston, Sterling Hedge Fund. Note: This is the man managing the hostile takeover bid of your grandmother's bakery chain in Georgia. We just ID'd him. Jasmine stared at the screen. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a rude passenger anymore. This was personal on a whole new level. She tapped the intercom button for the stewardess. "Sarah." "Yes, Miss Carter?" "Do we have Wi-Fi active yet?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good," Jasmine said, opening her laptop. "I have 7 hours to destroy a hedge fund. Can you bring me a green tea? I'm going to need the caffeine." The Boeing 737-300ER leveled off at a cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. The cabin was a hushed sanctuary of white noise and soft chimes. Outside the window of seat 1A, the Atlantic Ocean was a sprawling, dark void beneath a canopy of stars. But inside the suite, the atmosphere was electric with the silent hum of impending warfare. Jasmine Carter adjusted her seat to the lounge position. Sarah, the flight attendant, appeared almost instantly, placing a steaming pot of Sencha green tea and a small porcelain bowl of warm almonds on the console. "Is there anything else I can get you, Miss Carter?" Sarah asked, her voice lowered to a respectful whisper. "The chef has prepared the lobster thermidor, or if you prefer, we have a lighter sea bass." "Not yet, Sarah." "Thank you," Jasmine said, her eyes glued to the 14-inch laptop screen she had propped open on the tray table. "I need privacy for the next hour. No interruptions unless the plane is falling out of the sky." "Understood, ma'am." As Sarah retreated, pulling the privacy divider halfway shut, Jasmine cracked her knuckles. The physical confrontation with Greg Alliston was over, but the real battle had just begun. Greg thought he had merely insulted a random passenger. He didn't realize he had handed a loaded gun to his executioner. Jasmine opened a terminal window on her laptop. She typed in a command string that bypassed the standard passenger Wi-Fi, routing her connection directly through the aircraft's encrypted satellite uplink, a perk of owning the plane. The connection speed jumped to military-grade levels. She started with a simple search: Sterling Hedge Fund. The results flooded the screen. It was a mid-sized, aggressive fund based in Midtown Manhattan. They specialized in distressed assets and hostile restructuring. In layman's terms, they found companies that were struggling, bought enough debt to control them, gutted the staff to inflate short-term profits, and then sold the husks for parts. Greg Alliston was listed as a senior managing partner. His bio photo showed him smiling, that same shark-like, veneer-capped smile, standing on a golf course in the Hamptons. "Okay, Greg," Jasmine murmured, taking a sip of tea. "Let's see what you're hiding." She switched to her proprietary data mining software, Onyx. It was an AI-driven analytics tool her company, Carter Dynamics, had developed for forensic accounting. It could chew through public filings, leaked emails, and market trends faster than a team of 100 auditors. She fed Sterling Capital into the maw of the program. The screen cascaded with data visualization, red lines indicating debt, green lines indicating assets. Jasmine's eyes darted across the numbers. At first glance, Sterling looked healthy. They had posted record returns for 3 quarters. But Jasmine knew better than to trust the surface. "Show me the leverage," she commanded softly. The software peeled back the layers. And there it was. Greg Alliston was gambling. He was heavily leveraged on a massive merger deal involving a pharmaceutical logistics company called BioStream. The data showed that Sterling had borrowed against almost 80% of its liquid assets to fund the acquisition. It was a house of cards. If the BioStream deal failed, or if Sterling's liquidity was questioned, the margin calls would be catastrophic. But that wasn't the smoking gun. Jasmine needed something stickier, something personal. She remembered the alert about her grandmother's bakery. Mama Hattie's Biscuits. It wasn't a global conglomerate. It was a beloved chain of 20 Southern-style bakeries in Georgia and the Carolinas. It was the foundation of the Carter family's original wealth, long before Jasmine wrote her first line of code. Greg's fund was trying to force a buyout. They wanted the real estate. The bakeries sat on prime downtown lots in gentrifying neighborhoods. Greg didn't care about the biscuits or the 60-year history. He wanted to bulldoze them to build condos. Jasmine opened the file on the buyout attempt. Greg had been using dirty tactics, zoning complaints, orchestrated health inspection audits, harassment lawsuits from shell companies. It was a classic bleed-them-out strategy. Jasmine felt a cold rage settle in her chest. She touched the locket around her neck, which held a picture of her and Hattie. Hattie had taught her to read. Hattie had bought her first computer. "You messed with the wrong family, Greg," she whispered. She pulled up the passenger manifest log, which she could access as the plane's owner. She found Greg's full details. Gregory Thomas Alliston. Dobby. Lauto 03 to 12 horse hit 1982. She ran a cross-reference on his personal holdings. He was overextended personally, too. 3 mortgages. A yacht that was being chartered out to cover its own docking fees. Alimony payments to 2 ex-wives. Greg Alliston was living paycheck to paycheck. It was just a very, very large paycheck. Jasmine smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted a limping gazelle. She opened her secure email client. She composed a message to her chief financial officer, Marcus Thorne, who was currently in Tokyo. Subject: Project Icarus. Priority: urgent, immediate action. Marcus, I need you to open a short position on Sterling Capital's parent holding company. Ticker STRC. Leverage it 5x. Use the reserve fund. Simultaneously, I want you to contact the board of directors at BioStream. Send them the dossier attached to this email. It proves that Sterling Capital is liquidity insolvent and is using their acquisition as collateral for personal loans for their partners. Also contact the legal team in Atlanta. I want a countersuit filed against Sterling for the harassment of Mama Hattie's Biscuits. And I want us to make a tender offer to buy the debt Sterling holds on the bakeries. We're buying the debt, Marcus. We're going to become their landlord. Do it now, before the markets close in New York. Jay. She hit send. The beauty of the modern world was that you didn't need to wield a sword to cut someone down. You just needed better Wi-Fi. But she wasn't done. The financial ruin would take a few days to fully materialize. She wanted something immediate. She wanted the world to see the man who thought he could throw a woman's bag in the dirt. She remembered the woman in row 2 who had been recording. Jasmine unbuckled and stood up. She walked back to the second row. A young woman with bright pink hair and a nose ring was sitting there, editing a video on her phone. "Excuse me," Jasmine said softly. The girl looked up, eyes widening. "Oh my God, you're her, the boss." "I'm Jasmine," she said, extending a hand. "Chloe," the girl said, shaking it vigorously. "That was epic. I've never seen a takedown like that." "I saw you filming," Jasmine said. "Oh yeah. I got the whole thing. Him throwing your bag, him screaming at the captain, the whole 'do you know who I am' speech. It's gold." "What were you planning to do with it?" Chloe grinned. "I have a TikTok following, about 2 million. I was just about to post it." Caption: "First class Karen gets owned." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "Chloe, would you mind if I sent that video to a few contacts of mine first? I can promise you it will get a lot more than 2 million views." Chloe handed over her phone without hesitation. "Be my guest." "Burn him." Jasmine airdropped the file to her own phone. She didn't post it to social media directly. That was too amateur. Instead, she forwarded the video to a contact named Sarah Jenkins, senior producer, CNN. She added a simple note: "Exclusive. The man who grounded my plane today. Greg Alliston of Sterling Capital. Feel free to run it. I'm available for a comment when I land." She sent a second copy to the Wall Street Journal. She handed the phone back to Chloe. "Go ahead and post it, Chloe. Let's see who gets more views." Jasmine returned to seat 1A. She sat down and watched the flight map. They were passing over Nova Scotia. The missiles were away. Now, she just had to wait for impact. 2 hours later, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted from tension to a strange, camaraderie-filled relaxation. The story had spread. The passengers knew they were flying with a legend. Jasmine was eating the lobster thermidor, which was excellent, when her laptop pinged with a priority alert. It had begun. The first domino fell on Twitter, now X. Chloe's video had gone viral instantly, boosted by the algorithm's love for justice porn. The hashtag #DoorFirstClassFreakout was trending #1 in the United States. But the real damage was happening in the financial sector. Jasmine opened CNBC's live stream in a small window. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking news, Sterling Capital under investigation, following allegations of liquidity fraud." The anchor, a sharp-faced man named Jim Cramer, was shouting at the camera, "I'm telling you, get out of Sterling. We just received a dossier, leaked from sources close to the BioStream merger, that shows Alliston's fund is playing with monopoly money. And folks, you have to see this video. This is the guy managing your pension funds." This guy. They cut to the clip. The quality was crisp. There was Greg, red-faced and sweating, screaming, "I don't care if she's the Queen of England," and throwing the canvas bag. The juxtaposition was brutal. On one side of the screen, the stock chart for Sterling's parent company was plummeting, a red vertical line that looked like a cliff edge. On the other side, Greg was abusing a young black woman who remained perfectly calm. It was a PR nuclear winter. Jasmine's email pinged again. It was Marcus. "Jay, it's a bloodbath. BioStream just issued a press release pulling out of the merger. They cited instability in partner leadership. Sterling's stock is down 40% in pre-market trading for tomorrow. We executed the short at the top. You've already made about $12 million on the drop. Also, the debt purchase on the bakery chain went through. We now own the note on Mama Hattie's properties. You can foreclose on Sterling's shell company whenever you want, or you can just forgive the debt and give the deeds to Hattie." Jasmine typed back, "Give the deeds to Hattie. Frame them." She leaned back, closing her eyes. The hum of the engines felt different now. It wasn't just mechanical. It was the sound of victory. But the universe has a way of adding twists. Sarah, the flight attendant, hurried over to Jasmine, looking flushed. She held the interphone handset against her chest. "Miss Carter." "Yes, Sarah." "The captain needs to speak with you. It's urgent. There's a call coming through via the airline's emergency dispatch." Jasmine frowned. "Who is it?" "It's Mr. Alliston, ma'am." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "He's calling the plane." "He's at the airport police station. He demanded his one phone call be to the airline operations center to stop the madness. They patched him through to the flight deck because he claims he has information vital to the flight's safety." "He's lying," Jasmine said. "He just wants to beg." "Captain Miller thinks so too, but he said you might want to hear this." Jasmine took the handset. She pressed it to her ear. "This is Jasmine Carter." The voice on the other end was a garbled, frantic mess of static and panic. "Jasmine, Miss Carter, please, you have to stop it." It was Greg. He sounded like a man who had been running a marathon while crying. "Stop what, Greg?" Jasmine asked, her voice ice-cold. "The video, the leak. My partners are calling me. They're freezing my accounts. BioStream pulled out. I'm going to lose everything. They're talking about an SEC investigation." "You should have thought about that before you tried to bully a passenger, Greg," Jasmine said. "Or before you tried to bulldoze my grandmother's bakery." There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. "Your grandmother?" Greg whispered. "Hattie Carter," Jasmine said. 344 to Martin Luther King Drive. Atlanta. "Does it ring a bell? You called her shop a blight on the neighborhood in your zoning application." "Oh, God," Greg moaned. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Ignorance is not an asset class, Greg," Jasmine said, "and neither is arrogance." "I'll apologize," Greg pleaded. "I'll do a press conference. I'll donate to charity. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please, if the stock drops another 10 points, I'm bankrupt. I have a mortgage. I have kids." Jasmine looked out the window. The moon was reflecting off the clouds below. It looked peaceful. "You have kids?" she asked. Yes, 2 daughters, 12 and 10. "Then I suggest you go home and teach them how to treat people," Jasmine said, "because you clearly failed to learn that lesson yourself." "Jasmine, please." "Goodbye, Greg." She handed the phone back to Sarah. "Tell the captain to block that frequency." Sarah took the phone, looking at Jasmine with a mix of awe and slight fear. "Is everything okay, Mom?" "Everything is perfect, Sarah. How much longer to London?" "About 4 hours, Mom." "Good. I'm going to take a nap. Wake me up for breakfast." Jasmine reclined the seat fully into a bed. She pulled the duvet up to her chin. She fell asleep to the sound of the engines, while 4,000 miles away, Greg Alliston's world burned to ash. The descent into Heathrow was bumpy. The grey English clouds were thick, buffeting the wings of the 737. But Jasmine slept through the turbulence. She woke up only when the landing gear deployed with a mechanical thud. She felt refreshed. She went to the lavatory, splashed water on her face, and tied her hair back. She looked in the mirror. She didn't look like a billionaire corporate raider. She still looked like the girl in the hoodie. And that was the point. When she returned to her seat, the cabin was preparing for landing. The other passengers were giving her deferential nods. The man in 2A, a British architect who had been silent the whole flight, leaned across the aisle. "I say," he murmured. "I checked the news. Sterling Capital has been suspended from trading pending an audit. Astonishing work. Just tidying up, Jasmine said with a small smile. The plane touched down smoothly, the reverse thrusters roaring as they braked on the wet tarmac. As they taxied to the gate, Jasmine turned on her phone. It was flooded. Thousands of notifications. Missed calls from news outlets, congratulations from business rivals, and a text from her grandmother. Hattie, baby girl, some lawyer just called and said we own the building, and that nasty man is gone. I don't know what you did, but I'm baking you a peach cobbler when you get home. Love you. Jasmine texted back. Love you too, Nana. Save me a slice. The plane came to a halt at Terminal 5. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Jasmine grabbed her battered rucksack. She didn't wait for the others. As the owner, she had the privilege of being the first off. Sarah opened the cabin door. Thank you for flying with us, Ms. Carter. It was an education. Take care of yourself, Sarah, Jasmine said. And check your employee portal. I authorized a bonus for the whole crew for handling the disruption professionally. Sarah beamed. Thank you, Mom. Jasmine walked up the jet bridge. The cool London air hit her face, but she wasn't walking into anonymity this time. At the end of the jet bridge, inside the terminal, a small crowd had gathered. It wasn't paparazzi. Jasmine's security team kept them away. It was a group of suits. Standing at the front was a man Jasmine recognized. It was Jerry, the man Greg had been yelling at on the phone back in New York, Greg's lawyer. He looked exhausted. He was holding a briefcase. Jasmine stopped. Two of her personal security guards, who met her at the gate, stepped forward, but Jasmine waved them down. Can I help you? Jasmine asked. Jerry swallowed hard. Ms. Carter, I represent Mr. Alliston. I thought you might, Jasmine said. Is he here? No, Jerry said. He's currently in custody in New York. The FAA pressed charges, but he sent me to deliver this. He held out a thick envelope. What is it? It's a surrender of equity, Jerry said, his voice defeating. He knows he's finished. He knows you bought the debt. He's offering his personal shares in Sterling Capital to you, free of charge, in exchange for you dropping the civil suit regarding the bakery. He just wants to save his house. Jasmine took the envelope. She weighed it in her hand. It was the deed to a man's life work. She looked at Jerry. He wants to save his house? Yes, it's all he has left. Jasmine thought about it. She thought about Greg's sneer. She thought about the dumpster comment. But she also thought about Hattie. Hattie wouldn't want someone homeless on her account. Hattie believed in justice, not cruelty. Tell him I'll take the shares, Jasmine said, tucking the envelope into her hoodie pocket. I'll drop the suit. He can keep his house. Jerry exhaled, his shoulders slumping in relief. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Carter. But, Jasmine added, her voice hardening, tell him that if I ever see him in an airport again, any airport, anywhere in the world, he better be scanning boarding passes or sweeping the floor, because if he ever tries to sit in a seat he didn't earn, I won't be so merciful. I will tell him, Jerry promised. Jasmine adjusted her backpack. Good. Now get out of my way. I have a meeting. She walked past him, moving through the terminal with the long, confident strides of a woman who didn't just own the plane, but the sky itself. As she cleared customs and stepped out into the arrivals hall, she saw a driver holding a sign. It didn't say Jasmine Carter. It just said 1A. She smiled. She walked toward the car, the automatic doors sliding shut behind her, sealing the chapter of Greg Alliston, and opening the rest of her life. The viral blast radius. The landing at Heathrow was the end of the flight, but it was only the beginning of the shockwave. In the age of information, events do not happen in isolation. They happened to everyone, everywhere, all at once. By the time Jasmine Carter's black SUV was merging onto the M4 motorway toward central London, the incident on Flight 404 had mutated from a news snippet into a cultural phenomenon. It wasn't just the video of Greg Alliston throwing the bag, it was the narrative. It was the perfect modern parable. The Seat 1A incident became shorthand for a specific kind of corporate arrogance. In New York, the fallout was nuclear. The New York Post ran the cover headline, "Grounded God, Hedge Fund Titan Clipped by Hoodie Heroin." But the real drama wasn't in the headlines, it was in the boardrooms. The leaked dossier Jasmine had sent to the BioStream board didn't just kill the merger, it triggered a forensic audit of the entire mid-cap financial sector. Analysts began looking for other Allistons, managers who were leveraging personal debt against professional assets. Panic set in. The Carter correction, as financial pundits began to call it, wiped $3 billion off the market in 2 days. It was a cleansing fire, and Greg Alliston was the match that had started it. 6 months later, the reality of ruin karma in stories is often swift, a lightning bolt. Karma in real life is slow. It is a grinder. It is the accumulation of small humiliations that erode a person's soul. Greg Alliston didn't go to jail. The FAA charges were settled with a plea deal involving a hefty fine and a 3-year ban from commercial air travel. He avoided prison, but he didn't avoid the sentence. His sentence was irrelevance. Sterling Capital was dissolved. The assets were sold off pennies on the dollar to a rival firm, ironically, one owned by a consortium that partnered with Carter Dynamics. Greg was fired for cause, which meant his golden parachute severance package was voided. The hard karma hit his personal life with the force of a freight train. His wife, a socialite who tolerated his temper as long as the credit cards worked, filed for divorce 3 weeks after the incident. She cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew she just didn't want to be Mrs. Seat Stealer. She took the house in the Hamptons. She took the friends. Greg moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Jersey City. It wasn't a slum, but for a man who used to look down on people from penthouses, it was a dungeon. One rainy Tuesday in November, Greg found himself standing in line at a coffee shop. He was wearing a generic suit. His bespoke ones had been sold to pay legal fees. He ordered a black coffee. "Name?" the barista asked. "Greg," he mumbled. The barista paused. She looked at him. She was young, maybe 20. She tilted her head. "Wait," she said, her voice raising. "Are you the airplane guy?" The chatter in the coffee shop stopped. Heads turned. Phones were raised. "No," Greg said, grabbing his cup, the hot liquid spilling onto his hand. "No, that's not me." "It is," someone shouted from the back. "Hey, where's your first-class seat now?" Greg fled. He ran out into the rain, the laughter of strangers chasing him down the street. That was his life now. He wasn't just broke. He was a meme. He was a punchline. He had become the static he once despised. The rise of the hoodie CEO. While Greg shrank, Jasmine Carter expanded. She had tried to remain anonymous, but the world wouldn't let her. The image of the young black woman in the charcoal hoodie, standing calm in the face of screaming privilege, resonated too deeply. She didn't do talk shows. She didn't write a memoir. Instead, she went to work. Carter Dynamics saw its stock price triple, but Jasmine used the influx of capital for a specific project. She launched the Alliston Initiative, named with biting irony. It was a scholarship and venture capital fund specifically for underestimated founders. It targeted entrepreneurs who didn't look the part, who didn't have the suits or the connections, but who had the genius. The bakery, Mama Hattie's Biscuits, became a pilgrimage site. People traveled from all over the country, not just for the peach cobbler, but to shake Hattie's hand. The debt Jasmine had bought was forgiven, and the deed was transferred to a trust that ensured the property could never be sold to developers. Hattie, now 82, didn't really understand the viral fame. She just knew that her granddaughter had fixed the glitch. The final encounter. A year after the flight, Jasmine found herself back at JFK Airport. She wasn't flying commercial this time. She was walking through the terminal to reach the private aviation wing. She was accompanied by Marcus Thorne, her CFO, and a small entourage of staff. They were walking past the food court in Terminal 4 when Jasmine stopped. "Miss Carter?" Marcus asked. "We're on a schedule. The jet is fueled." "1 second, Marcus," Jasmine said. She was looking at a small kiosk, selling travel insurance and SIM cards. Sitting behind the counter, wearing a blue vest that looked 2 sizes too small, was a man. His hair was thinning, the jail gone. He looked tired. He was explaining a data plan to a confused tourist. It was Greg, the mighty hedge fund manager, the man who moved millions with a phone call, was now selling $40 SIM cards on commission. Marcus followed her gaze. He recognized him. "Good Lord," Marcus whispered. "Do you want me to have security clear the area?" "No," Jasmine said. She walked over to the kiosk. Greg was looking down at his tablet, processing the transaction. "That will be $45, sir." "Sign here." The tourist signed and walked away. Greg looked up, ready to greet the next customer. "Can I help you with—" The words died in his throat. He looked at Jasmine. She was wearing a hoodie again, this time a navy blue one. She looked exactly the same. Greg didn't speak. His face flushed a deep, shameful red. He looked down at his cheap blue vest. He looked at her entourage. The contrast was brutal. "Hello, Greg," Jasmine said quietly. "Jasmine," he whispered. He didn't have the energy to be angry anymore. He was just defeated. "Here to gloat?" "No," Jasmine said. "I'm just passing through." She looked at the counter. "How are you?" It was a genuine question. That was the worst part for Greg. She wasn't kicking him while he was down. She was treating him like a human being, something he had failed to do for her. "I'm surviving," Greg said. "It's a job. Pays the rent." "Honest work," Jasmine nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was a voucher. "I was going to mail this to your lawyer," Jasmine said, placing it on the counter. "But since I'm here—" Greg looked at it. It was a certificate for a college trust fund. "What is this?" "For your daughters," Jasmine said. "I remember you said you had 2. 12 and 10, right? So 13 and 11 now." Greg stared at her, his eyes watering. "Why, after everything I did?" "Because they didn't throw my bag," Jasmine said firmly. "And because I don't want them to grow up thinking the world is only about taking things from people." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "You lost your seat, Greg. But don't lose your humanity. Teach them better than you were taught." Greg couldn't speak. He just nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. He touched the paper as if it were fragile. "Thank you," he choked out. "Goodbye, Greg." Jasmine turned and walked away. She didn't look back. She rejoined her team, and they moved toward the private terminal, a phalanx of success moving through the crowd. Greg Alliston watched her go. He watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then he took a deep breath. He wiped his face. A new customer walked up to the kiosk, a young woman with a heavy backpack, looking lost and stressed. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I'm looking for the shuttle to Terminal 7. I'm going to miss my flight." In the old days, Greg would have ignored her or pointed vaguely. Today, Greg stood up. He walked around the counter. "It's tricky," Greg said gently. "Walk with me. I'll show you the shortcut." He led her toward the tram, carrying her heavy bag for her. It was a small thing, a tiny act of service. But as he walked, for the first time in a year, Greg Alliston didn't feel like he was grounded. He felt like he was finally starting to climb. The world had shifted. The hierarchy had been inverted. But in the end, on the floor of JFK Terminal 4, the balance was restored. Not by revenge, but by grace. This story isn't just about a plane seat. It's about the invisible price tags we place on people based on how they look, and the catastrophic danger of assuming you are the most important person in the room. Greg Alliston learned the hard way that true power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need a suit, a first-class ticket, or a loud voice. True power is competence, ownership, and the quiet dignity of knowing exactly who you are. Jasmine Carter didn't just win a dispute, she rewrote the rules of the game. She showed us that when you underestimate someone based on their appearance, you aren't just making a social mistake. You might be declaring war on the very person who owns the ground you walk on. In a world full of Gregs, be a Jasmine. Be the person who builds the plane, not the one who complains about the seat. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and corporate justice, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps the channel fly higher. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a billionaire by her hoodie. And if you want more stories about underdogs taking down the arrogant elite, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a flight with us. Thanks for watching, and remember, kindness is free, but arrogance will cost you everything. See you in the next one.